Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Living More
More
with
with
the
the
Morgans.
Morgans.
And I'm your host, Landa Jeray Morgan, and this is my beautiful wife.
Rotunda Morgan.
And again, you're tuned in to Living More with the Morgans. And
Yes.
so, you guys, we want to apologize because we had some heavy technical difficulties. And see, babe, that's why we got to own our own thing.
If we don't own our
We
own
got to
thing,
see, people be talking about it's a bad thing to have money. No, we need to have money so
We
we can own
have
our
to.
own networks, our own equipment, our own
Yes.
software. So you guys, we definitely apologize for being on late
Yes.
tonight. We know it's past 9 o'clock, it's late, but you ain't doing nothing because it's election night. And so you already cast your vote, and so you
Right.
probably tuned
Yep.
in either to, CNN or
Yes,
Fox News or
Fox,
whatever.
yeah.
But turn away from that for a little bit. Go ahead and turn on to Living More with the Morgans. And again, we want to definitely have you in the building tonight. And so if you guys are
Yes.
tuned in, let us know. We're on several different channels right now.
Yes.
And again, as you guys know, we're on all over social media. I mean, come on now. If you're not on social media, y'all, I mean, you in the Stone Ages. We about to be in 2023.
Right.
So you definitely want to be in social media and active on
Yes.
social media. And right now, you can find us on Facebook. That's probably where a lot of people are viewing us.
Yes.
You're on my page or on my wife's page
Yes, you're on
directly
my
on
page.
Facebook. So you guys go ahead and tune in, hit them comments, let us know that you're in. We want to
Yes.
see some interaction, some hearts, some likes. Also, you're tuned in on Facebook.com/Living More Morgans. That is the official Facebook page for Living More with the Morgans. You may be
Yes.
also tuned in on Twitter. Yes, people still tune in on Twitter,
Yes.
Periscope, and that you can find us on Twitter.com/Live More Morgans. We had to shorten it, so it's Live More Morgans on Twitter. And then we're also live on YouTube. And if you're on YouTube, you got your own channel. We do follow back. We want you to hit us up on YouTube and
Please
subscribe
do.
to our channel. Right now,
Yes.
you can. We got a brand new handle on YouTube, right? They let
Yes.
everybody, configure their own handles, so you can find us on YouTube.com/Living More Morgans. Again, YouTube.com/Living More Morgans. And then also, you can follow us and like us there on Instagram. Get all new content, brand new content. We might even do the subscribe thing that they've got going on Instagram. It's brand
Yes.
new, so we'll have some exclusive content for you guys. So we're gonna keep it PG-13, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, 'cause
Absolutely.
I know you.
See, there you go.
No, I know you. You want to be. We're gonna keep that to us though, right? The
Right. Absolutely.
freaky content. We're gonna see how y'all she started, y'all. But yo, hit us up on social media, you guys. Follow us, like us, subscribe. We would definitely want to see you, and we want to engage with you. That's what social media is all about, you guys. Again, we're on YouTube. Our YouTube channel is brand new. We just rolled it out a couple of months ago, and we want you to subscribe because we're going to have brand new exclusive content on there. All of our live content will be on our YouTube channel, along with some new videos that we're going to be posting here in the future when we travel.
Yes.
Yeah. So when we travel, when we out and abroad, we're going to be bringing it to you from different countries, different places around the world. We
Yes.
want you to be tuned in to Living More with the Morgans, because that's what we're here to do. We're here to live more and help you live more and live life to the fullest. And so we just want to do a roll check. We want to go through our social media pages and just see who is on. Babe, you got anybody on over there? Because if they're not on, we need to, come on now.
Make sure.
We need to get people on.
Right.
And so, our very own Apostle Sean Anike is on the line, and I know he's gonna say something about us being late because he's the king of late. And if anybody knows a thing or two about being late, it's our spiritual papa, Apostle Sean Anike.
Papa, we press.
We press tonight.
Regardless
I'm
of all of the
yes,
issues
indeed.
that happen all of a sudden.
He said on there, we are super late.
We
Yes,
are, and
yeah.
we don't like to be.
We don't like to be. We hate
Yes.
being late, you guys, and our sincere apologies because of the technical
Yes.
difficulties. My wife can tell you I was preparing 2.5 hours before 8 o'clock, before the broadcast.
We always prepare hours and hours,
before. Yes.
Again, this is technology. Nobody said that things wouldn't happen.
Right.
What we can do as people is roll with it. It happens. it won't stop us.
Right. You
I
got to roll
just
with the
want to
punches.
say that.
And see, that's what living
That's
more
what
is about.
living more is about.
You got to, hey, even when the obstacles come,
Right.
you got to find a way to go around and go through them
Right.
sometimes. And so that's what we had to do last week. We had to do it again today. And again, like I said, we prepared hours in advance. And even still, as soon as we're about to get on, boom,
Yeah.
something's got to go down. Something's got to
Yes.
happen with these technical difficulties. So you guys, we do apologize, but we're on right now.
Yes,
And
and
if
our
you're
son
on-
is on too.
Who else is on? Oh, Joshua.
Joshua.
Our son Joshua Obanga, all the way in Abuja, Nigeria, is on. I
Yes.
know it's late there, you guys. So if they're up in
Yes,
Nigeria, in
Joshua.
Abuja, Nigeria, our very own spiritual son is up and he's
Yes.
watching. Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much, son, for
son.
tuning in. And
We
we're
love
going to
you.
make it worth your while tonight because we're taking it back to Africa, y'all. We finna go back to Africa. That is tonight's show. And why go back to Africa? Now, it used to be a derogatory term.
Yes.
It really did.
Yeah.
It used to be a derogatory term, particularly here in America, where, people of other persuasions, when they would get mad at us or they felt like we
Yeah.
were out of our place or demanding too much, they would say, oh, well, why don't you just go back to Africa, right? And so I wanted to take the power out of that.
Right.
Because when you say go back to Africa, they were meaning it as, like it's a bad thing.
Right.
And it's not a bad thing.
Right.
Going back to Africa, for us as African Americans in particular,
Is a wonderful.
is a wonderful thing. It's a beautiful thing. And so we're going to give power back to that statement tonight. Go back to Africa. So if you're tuned in, if you know some people who are into travel, into business,
Right.
some married couples, singles, whomever, anybody who's interested in going to Africa, paying a visit to Africa, we
Yes.
definitely want them to tune in. So go ahead, share this broadcast on your wall. Go ahead and subscribe wherever you're watching. We want to get you guys in because we've got some information. This is going to be a loaded show today.
Right.
And I tell you why, because we had to split it up to part 1 and part 2.
That's right.
And the reason why we had to split it up, y'all, because we got a lot that we want to talk about, a lot that we want to get into. So we want to make sure that, we pour our hearts out on this program in particular. And as you can see behind us,
Right.
we got the African flags going.
Yes.
Every nation
Yes.
is displayed behind us. So we're going to keep that rolling. And we representing for all of the African nations.
Yes,
and
we
again,
are.
why are we doing that? Because we want to encourage, our African American brothers and sisters to go back to Africa to discover your roots. And why is that?
Because we need to.
We need to.
We have to. We have to. It is the truth. In order for you to know where you're going, you have to know where you come from.
You got to know where you come from.
You have to.
Right.
I mean, it's imperative. You won't know which way to go. I mean, it's imperative for us to know because, again, we're here in America. And, we say this often, there's other cultures and other groups. They know, okay, I'm from Britain or I'm from where?
Europe,
anywhere,
Asia, yeah.
But us as African Americans, I don't want you to think that it's not important for us to know. People say, oh, well, it's okay. You don't have to know. You're here. No, we need to know.
Right.
Because, again, in order for you to know where you're going, you have to know where you come from.
Right. And that's a great point because, and let's wind it back. Let's kind of wind it back a bit because you said something that was very key. Us as African Americans in particular, we don't necessarily know where we come from, right? And so we know, if we give ourselves a little bit of history, we know that, our forefathers and our ancestors came by on ships and boats.
Right.
And they came by through the transatlantic slave trade,
Right.
that a lot of the European nations were involved in. We're
Yes.
talking about Portugal, Spain,
Yeah.
all throughout Europe, they were involved in this. Even the Arab nations were involved in
Yes.
this slave trade.
Right.
And so our ancestors came here on ships. But here's the thing about America. We were the last to get off the boat. Right?
Right.
So we've got cousins, we've got family members, distant family members that were dropped off in the Caribbean,
Right.
that were dropped off in Brazil,
Right.
that were dropped off in Mexico.
Right.
That's where a lot of people don't
Cuba.
think. Cuba. A lot of people don't think that Africans are in Mexico.
Right.
They don't think that Africans are in Brazil or
They
South
are.
America
They're-
or Costa Rica,
Right.
Central America.
Right.
But Africans are throughout the place because the slave trade was involved in those places because of the commodities and because of the resources that they were growing and
That's
that they
right.
were manufacturing there. And we're talking about cotton, we're talking about sugar,
Sugar,
we're talking
right.
about tobacco, all those different things that were being produced on plantations. Black people, the slaves were forced labor to work those plantations
Right.
so that the Europeans and other groups that were tied to the Europeans could acquire their wealth.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So just to give a little bit of history on why it is we don't know where we come from.
That's right.
Right? Because, and a lot of us, we originated out of West Africa and we think that because that's where the slave ports and the ships docked.
That's right.
Was in West Africa, primarily in West Africa. And so, but we come from across the whole continent, right?
The
And
whole
so
continent.
the thing about that is you could be African American and you could have folk as far as Ethiopia,
Yes.
even though they weren't colonized.
Right.
But you could have folk as far as Congo, you could have folk
Right.
as far as South Africa, Zimbabwe, or whatever, that ended up migrating to the West because of how big the slave trade was. And I'm not going to get into all the particulars with the slave trade and everything because there's a lot to that.
Right.
And we can unpack that for days. But the
Correct.
thing of it is that when we got here, when we landed here, we didn't have an opportunity to know who our family members were.
Right.
We were separated from our family
Right,
members.
right.
You know, brothers and sisters, cousins, uncle, you name it. We're separated during the transatlantic slave trade. And so we're the last to get to America.
Right.
Right?
That's right.
And when we get here, there's Native Americans here that were known as quote unquote Indians, incorrectly deemed and termed as Indians. But Native American, the original indigenous people here that we know were here
Right.
before Africans from the ships arrived here. Now, many scholars and some scholars say that Africans were already here in North America. Here in North America, and of course, that includes Canada. But that again, that's a lot to unpack.
Right.
With that being said, I find it, honey, that we're the only primary race group in the world that can't readily trace our ancestry back to one specific group of people, right?
Right.
Like our Nigerian brothers, they can trace it back to a specific tribe in Nigeria, right? Our Ethiopian brothers, they can trace it back to their Kenyan brothers. They can trace it back. But African Americans, we cannot readily trace our ancestry back to a specific group of people
No.
or tribe.
No.
And so, because of that, we're not fully aware of who we are.
Right. Now, they have the, where you can do the ancestry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
You can do that and everything and try to trace back. I remember that our bishop, he did it. And he traced back to finding out that he was Nigerian.
Yes.
Right? And so they do have, those what I want to say, products out there that can help you trace back.
Right.
But this is just me, okay? Is it really accurate?
And see, that's a great question, right? That's a great question, and I can't fully answer that because I don't know. I haven't taken the ancestry test, right?
And neither have I.
And so, if there are some people who have taken the ancestry test and may be
Yes.
watching, please feel free to chime in and comment if you have taken the DNA ancestry
Yes.
test. And there's several companies that are out there.
I was going to say that. There were several companies.
Ancestry.com.
Yes.
There's several of them out there, and there's some that are out there particularly for African Americans or people of color.
Right.
Because the records for us were poorly kept.
Yes.
Right.
Very much so.
Records for a lot of the European immigrants and other people of other cultures and descent, their records were better kept than ours.
Right.
Right. So there's a lot of mystery as to how far certain things date back. Certain records about what ships we came over on,
Right.
the slave masters that owned our enslaved ancestors and so forth. So there's a lot of shady records out there.
That's
So
right.
it's more difficult from what I've heard. And
Yes.
again, anybody who's out there, please fact check me on this. It's more difficult to trace African American ancestry through DNA, right? Now, if you don't know, let me hip you to this, and you should know this, is that the whitest scientist today will tell you that mankind and civilization started in Africa, on the continent of Africa, period, right? If you're a Christian or if you're a believer in Christian theology and so forth, you will trace that back to the genetic gene of Eve, Adam and Eve, okay, who were in the Garden of Eden, and people believe that, of course, the Garden of Eden was in Africa.
Right.
Okay.
That's right.
And so civilization, as we know it today, all the race groups of the world come out of Africa. Whether you're white, Asian, Mexican, Hispanic, whatever,
Right.
you come out of Africa. Okay.
Right.
Because of how dominant our gene is, the African gene is. So I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of history before we really dig into this topic as to why we are not only celebrating Africa, but we are pushing other African American brothers and sisters in particular to go back to Africa. This is what the show is about.
Yes.
Go back and go visit, right?
Yes.
So I wanted to give you guys some history because our history, our ancestry has kind of been lost in the shuffle.
Right.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Again, we didn't keep the best of records. The best records weren't kept of us. And also, African Americans, from what I know, again, we're the only group of people on the planet that can't trace our surname, our last name, to and we trace it back to the plantation owners or the slave owners that enslaved our ancestors.
Right.
But let me say this before we go even further. To my African Americans who may be watching, we are not the descendants of slaves.
No,
Let me get that very clear. We are not the descendants of slaves.
No, we're not.
We are the descendants of people who were enslaved.
That's right.
Okay. And before they were enslaved, they were builders. They were dignitaries. They were royals. They were, and it's popular today to say, "Oh, what's up, king? What's up, queen?" And so they were, we celebrate that royalty, but do we really understand what that is? Do we really understand what that means?
I don't think so.
Why do you say that?
Because the way we carry ourselves, okay, and how we act, how we treat one another.
When you say we, who in particular?
African American people, okay, how we treat one another. How we carry ourselves. I beg to differ. Right. If you understood who you really are, you would treat your brother or your sister as if they're your brother or your sister.
Right.
We have a tendency, because of what we've gone through in this country, we have a tendency to do what we did when we were enslaved people, which is what? Is to backbite a lot, to be indifferent to one another. Right. We don't do, even when I was growing up, people used to help each other. Right. We don't help one another. Yeah. We try to outdo one another. We're not, we don't lock arms. We don't lock arms.
So, and I totally understand the debate in using that word king and queen.
Right.
And I definitely want to touch more on that in the broadcast. But the reason why I even say that and bring that up is because we were indeed that, right? Our people were that. Our people are brilliant people. We come from a brilliant stock of people. We come from a beautiful heritage. And so over time, our heritage, our names were stripped from us. Our heritage was stripped from us. Our original religion and belief systems were stripped from us. Right. And they were replaced with Caucasian ideologies that ended up becoming our way of life and how we ended up looking at ourselves. More in a diminished light.
Very much
and so we started looking at ourselves as inferior.
Right. Yes,
right?
Yes.
We started looking at ourselves as less than.
Right.
And so why? Because when you've been enslaved for hundreds of years, when you've had the whip cracked over your back, and you've been told that your brain is smaller than your white counterparts. See, we're going to touch on some things in this.
And that and it makes you feel your self-esteem.
Yeah.
I mean, you lose
absolutely.
all of that.
Yeah. And see, the reason why I want to touch on this, you guys, is because when we say go back to Africa, we're saying to do it not for just a vacation.
No.
Not just to go on holiday.
No.
Not just to go up and kick your feet. You can do that anywhere. But to value the culture, the people, the environment from which you come from.
Yes.
But if you don't understand the history, then when you go, you won't understand you won't have a value of what it is that you're seeing or experiencing.
That's right.
Okay? You won't know to put value on it. You'll just see, oh, those are beautiful animals. Those are beautiful giraffes. That was a great safari. When Africa is so much more than safaris and waterfalls and cheetahs and tigers.
Right. Which is beautiful.
Which is beautiful.
Beautiful.
But I want our people,
right,
as African Americans, people of color, to understand that it's more than that.
Right.
And so before you go, I want to really touch on our history and the value and the importance of our history so that people know, especially us as African Americans, we don't have that foundation. We don't know of it.
Right.
And so I think I think we struggle in today's society because we don't have a firm grasp on who it is that we come from, where we come from.
Right. Right.
And so when you said it earlier, and you prefaced it by saying, when you don't know where you come from, how in the world can you know where you're going?
Yeah.
When you don't know the stock of people that you come from,
that's right,
and the beauty that they had, then you'll look at yourself as less than always.
Right.
You can have money and still look at yourself as less than. We see that today in today's society.
Yeah.
You can see people draped with diamonds and bling bling and gold and all this stuff, but when they look in the mirrors, they still devalue themselves. Why? Because they don't have a strong, firm foundation of who they are. And when you don't have that, then how can you know who you are? How can you know what you're capable of doing?
Right.
Right?
That's
and so I really want to touch on that in these broadcasts. And again, we're going to get into all the travel stuff and all the beauty of Africa and all the things that we have personally experienced during our 4 trips to Africa. But before we get in that, again, I really want to touch on the history as to why we need to scale it back and get an understanding of what was robbed from us.
Right.
And why it was robbed from us.
Right.
And these are things sometimes that we don't want to talk about publicly because we don't want to point the finger. We don't want to be politically incorrect. A lot of times we don't want to feel like, oh, we're bringing up old stuff again, and we're bringing up slavery and we're bringing up the white man and all these different things. And so we tend to just kind of gloss over it and sweep it under the rug as if it's not something that has affected our people in our communities for the past 400 years.
It has affected us, I believe, tremendously.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of the mental health issues that we have as people has because of being enslaved people and coming from that, people who went through that, because that was trauma. You have to remember, babe, that once when they were enslaved, they began to marry, have children, and then those children come through the traumatic trauma that their parents was going through. So they were watching it and they were growing up in it, and then they had kids, and then their kids had kids, and then do you think that that has happened to us as a people is just gone. No, it's not. And that's the reason why we're saying, in order for us to know where we're going, we have to go back. And, you know, I remember talking to, and just to bring this up, because people here in this country has almost literally has forgotten, especially the older generation, about, you know, Africa. I remember telling my parents, I think the first time we went in, it was Nigeria. And my mom was like, oh, y'all going to Africa? I said,
Kenya.
yes. It was Kenya. That's right. And I said, yes, ma'am. And she was like, well, why y'all going over there to see them? I said, well, we're going for you know,
At
for
the time of business.
Yeah, business. And so when she said that, she didn't say it as if those people, but what she was, because they have been here and they grew up through all of that their parents and grandparents and great-grandparents went through, there's a disconnect.
Absolutely.
That's the word I wanted to get to you guys. There is a disconnect. And with us and our children and our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, and so forth and so on, we cannot continue to have that disconnect.
Right.
We have to know it so that they can know.
Right.
So that they can be able to flourish and flow and do the things, the exploits and the things that they're supposed to do on this earth,
And
in this earth.
And you touched on something that was very, very key, is that you said even the older generation has this disconnect from Africa.
They do.
And I know
I saw it through my parents.
Absolutely. And I know it to be right because, and the reason why I believe that it's there is because there is, and we need to talk about this, y'all. We got to talk about it. Again, this is the elephant in the room that we're not discussing among one another. And so if you're super sensitive, you might want to turn off, because we're going to take it there, and we need to take it there so we can get some healing for real.
Healing, so we can grow, that we can be all that God wants us to be.
Right.
For the people who are faith-based people, let me say that, because that's us too. We want to be all that God wants us to be. That's in body, mind, soul, and spirit.
Right.
I mean, totality, okay?
Right.
So that is the reason why we must talk about this for us as African Americans, so that we can understand, yes, it's important to go back to Africa. Yes, it's important to know, try to find out where we're from.
And I think,
try to have a connection with the people, the soil.
And I think Africans as well.
I was going to touch on that.
I think Africans as well need to hear this, need to hear our hearts as African Americans, but also the discussion needs to go on both sides of the table.
It has to.
It can't just be a one-sided discussion.
Right.
It has to be. And let me get back to what you were saying about the older generation, particularly even your parents. I think that divide is there because there was a distrust of limited information that their generation knew about the transatlantic slave trade. Right? They didn't know in-depth details of it because, again, it wasn't put in their history books back then.
No, it was not.
It was intentionally kept out of the history books so that black people would not know their history. And here's the thing. Even with that, you have to remember, you guys, black people in this country were not allowed to read.
No.
Let me say that again. And this wasn't long ago. This wasn't 300 years ago, 200 years ago.
No, it was not.
This was during the lifetime of my wife's parents, which are in their 80s and 90s. So this wasn't that long ago. Where and these things have lingering long-term effects. And so when people say, "Oh, well, we just need to get past it and we get over it," well, if it didn't happen to you, then it's easy for you to say that.
It's real easy.
It's real easy for you to say that and just dismiss it when you or your people or your culture or your heritage didn't go through that.
It's like someone who's gone through some type of trauma. If you didn't go through it, then you don't understand on the magnitude or the level that person that went through it had to go through it. When you just said, I'm going to say something about reading, and they weren't allowed to read. You know, my grandmother, who lived to be 109 years old, who did go through it, went through slavery. Okay? Her sisters and brothers did. Her parents did.
Right.
She was 109 years old when she passed from here on this earth in 2005. You know what she told me when she started learning how to read? Because they couldn't read. The first thing she learned how to read was what? What do you think it was?
It was the Bible.
It was the Bible. The Bible that they were given in this country, the Bible.
Right.
That's what she learned when she learned how to read. So, and that's hurtful. Of course, that's my grandma. That's my grandparent.
Right.
You know, but it's important that you guys understand, like my husband said, like Babe said, this was not long ago.
Right.
This was not long ago, you guys. I mean, my parents went through segregation.
Right.
You know, you cannot think that all of this stuff wasn't traumatic to a group of people.
Right.
You cannot think that, okay, let's sweep it under the rug. We cannot sweep it under the rug. And I'm speaking, let me just say this, babe. I'm speaking for myself because of my parents on my mom's side and my dad's side. We cannot. Because why? They want us to find out. They want us to know who we are so that we can be empowered to be better people and better for one another. How are we going to do that if we're going to continue to say, people keep telling us, oh, it's okay. Don't worry about it. You're here. You know, God, Jesus paid it all at the cross. We know that.
Right.
But guess what? God says, in all thou getting understanding.
Yes.
And we're going to get an understanding in this country. I want us to.
And I'm glad you took it there, because what we tend to do, what I've noticed personally, is that other people groups who know where they come from, who know their origin, who know their roots, who know their heritage, they kind of dismiss us as African Americans when we start talking about us wanting to know ours.
I'm sorry if you're dismissing,
that's the experience I've had personally.
I have too.
Is that when we as African Americans start saying, well, no, we want to know our experience,
so
then the Christians, we tend to paint it, oh, well, Jesus loves you, and Jesus doesn't look at color, and we paint it with this broad, Jesus brush, and oh, brother, it doesn't matter. We're all one in the same family. We all love God, and da 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 da. And so our heritage, our desire to want to know who we are tends to be dismissed, tends to be evicted out of the conversation. But my Hispanic and Mexican brothers and sisters and my Spanish brothers and sisters who know where they come from, who know their family ancestry, who know their family roots, they have no problem. But as soon as I, as an African American, say, you know what, I want to be able to do that. I want to be able to trace. I want to be able to know who we are, where we stand, and why our people have had the plight that they've had, not just in America, but throughout the world. And so, because I have a longing to know that, that's why I'm telling people, and we're telling people, in order to trace that, at least start with where you know your ancestors came from, and that's the continent of Africa. You may not be able to pinpoint, oh, they come from Senegal, or they come from Ivory Coast, or they come from Nigeria. You may not necessarily be able to pinpoint it, but I can tell you this, that as an African American, when I stepped foot on that soil back in 2018 for the first time, it messed me up. It changed my life forever. And I had already had this longing to go to Africa since like 2003, 2004. I think it was when Bishop Jakes did the Mega Fest in South Africa, I believe.
He did Mega Fest.
He did Mega Fest. And I remember I wanted to go so bad, baby. And I wanted to take Mom and all this stuff. And I don't know if we had just probably started talking again. I can't remember. But I wanted to take my mom, and I believe the tickets at the time for the flight, hotel, all that stuff was like $6,000 a piece. And I was so hurt that I financially could not afford to go to MegaFest to experience Africa. And I always had it deep in my heart, like, yo, one of these days, I'm going to experience Africa. Now, I didn't know it was going to be 15 years later, But even though it was 15 years later, it felt just as good.
Yes.
It felt just as beautiful and blessed to do it 15 years later.
Yes.
And I probably appreciated it more later on in life than I would have if I would have done it in my early 20s back in 2003, going to MegaFest.
Yes.
And so we shared this, you guys, because as African Americans and those who are tuning in that call America home, it is imperative for us to know who we are, where we come from, and not to always, again, paint this broad picture or this broad Christian brush.
Right.
Because that doesn't fill the void in our hearts. So when you say that and you're not a person of color, when you say that or you're not African American, when you say that and you are African and you may not necessarily understand why that's a need or desire for us, that can come across as insensitive, because here's the thing, you know.
Right.
And ain't nobody gonna question you because you know. But when it comes to us and we don't know, you have to understand that there's a longing for us to know, who are we?
Right. And why is it to me, and this is just me, okay, it seemed like it's such a, it's okay, don't worry about it. It's such a, don't do it.
Yeah,
but I want to know why that is.
Right.
Is it something I need to find out?
Right.
Is it something that's hidden?
Is it something that other people know
right.
that we don't know,
right.
or they don't want us to know?
Right. Right.
And so when you say that and you push me away from wanting to find out who I am and where I come from, that makes me even more curious. I'm even more inquisitive now to know, is there something behind door number 3 that you're keeping me from?
What is it?
Because you don't have no problem with me going through door number 1 and number 2, because you've seen me go through door number 1 and number 2 and bump my head and not me figure out who I am.
Right.
But there's something behind door number 3 that it feels like maybe you know something about, maybe the rest of the world knows about, that we don't know about.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And so, and here's the thing. There are some people groups that I've talked to personally, and particularly our white brothers and sisters, where there are some that feel like once we figure that out, once we know who we are, we're going to retaliate in a manner that says, oh, we're going to get you back for the 400 plus years of slavery and prejudice and yada, yada, yada. We have to remember, you guys, that it wasn't that long ago. It was in my mama's time, my grandmother's time, that today, November the 8th, black folks couldn't vote. There are people alive. So it wasn't that long ago. There are people alive now, today, that remember a time in America, on America's soil, that black people, African Americans, did not have the right to vote because of the color of their skin. They were not deemed as citizens of this nation.
That's right.
So why is it so hard for us to talk about that?
Yes.
And it's not us, oh, we're going to keep bringing it back so we can point the finger and make people feel guilty and make people feel bad. No, that is a part of the fabric of this country.
That's right.
And so what happens is that other people groups, particularly my African brothers and sisters, I got to talk to y'all. What happens is a lot of your groups come here and you're not aware of that. You're not aware of that history. And so when you hear us as African Americans kind of bring those things up and talk about them, they can kind of, oh, well, here they go again, or they're angry, or they're ranting, and this and this and this and that.
Come on, you guys. Let's
really
let's stop doing that. Because guess what that does? That keeps us divided.
That keeps us divided. And what it looks like, particularly as Christians, is I would want to know what is keeping you from your greatest potential. I would want to know what is it in you? What is it in your people group? What is it within you? With all the talent that y'all have, and I'm talking to, as African Americans, with all the talent that y'all have, with all the accomplishments that y'all have, with all of the grand things that you guys have done throughout history, why is there still this angst? Why is there still this anger, this righteous indignation that you as African Americans would carry? If I was a part of another people group, I would want to know why. I wouldn't look at it as, oh, they're complaining, because don't nobody do the Jews like that. When Jewish people bring up the Holocaust, which was atrocious, we don't look at our Jewish brothers and sisters and say, oh, well, here they go ranting about the Holocaust again, and they was in the gas chambers, and da-da. We don't do that with them.
Oh, that was
that was extreme.
Yes.
That was horrific, and it wasn't that long ago.
Yes.
This wasn't the 1800s, y'all. This wasn't that long ago.
Right, right.
And so, why is it that when it comes to us as African Americans, as Black people, we dismiss that? No, that is the part of the culture, of the fabric of this culture, and we need to talk about it, and we need to deal with it.
Right.
And so, again, the reason why this is part one of this conversation of going back to Africa, because what I didn't want, honey, is I didn't want this, oh, y'all, let's go back to Africa and go see Kenya and go see Zimbabwe and go see Zambia and let's go and look at the beautiful scenery and landscape. I didn't want that.
Right.
Because what that does is, again, you don't value what it is that you're going to see in the people and in the infrastructure.
That's right.
When you get there.
That's right. And then when you do see that, and you'll begin to value every bit of it. The animals and the landscape. Yeah, all of that goes hand in hand once you go to learn and to find out and to just put your feet on the soil.
Yes.
And I think that what that will do, honey, is I think that will, not all people, but some people, I hope all of us, most of us, would want to say, I need to find out. I need to find out what tribe or what area I'm from, the best you can, because it again, please don't tell me that it's not important.
Right.
It is it's extremely important. It's important for us, for our child and our children that's coming. We have to be able to tell them. Because I was looking at and Ashley Parker is on, and thank you, Ashley,
Ashley,
so
what's
much
going
for
on?
coming on. And she said, my ancestors were also enslaved by Native Americans. Okay? This is what she said.
Yes.
Do we think that just because we're in 2022 and it's all, okay, it's gone, it's dissipated,
Right.
that, we shouldn't even worry about it, we shouldn't even be bothered with it? No, even the more now,
Right.
even the more now we should want to know. And we shouldn't allow people to tell us that, oh no, you shouldn't want to know. It's okay, let's just keep moving on, keep moving forward. If you want to know, this is why the show is tonight. I believe this is why we were delayed. I don't think that this was something that in the atmosphere that we put out here for everybody to watch tonight and for us, our people, to know.
Right.
I think that was something that might have been wanting to stop us. But guess what? It's not going to stop us.
Right.
Because we want people to be liberated. We want people, especially our people, to know that you're valuable, that you're important. Look at what you've done in this country. We built this country. Yeah, we did. And we've done so many great things here.
Right.
The music we brought here, all the things that we've done in sports, and all of the things we've done in Hollywood and different genres. We've done so many great things. So should we just stop and say, okay, well, we've done all these great things here? No. There's a longing in most of us that says there's a disconnect.
Very much so.
There's a disconnect, and we need to get that connection. We need to find it.
Our spiritual father is Nigerian. Okay. Now, our pastor, Bishop Jakes, is African American.
Right.
Okay. And we're a weird bunch because we need them both.
Right. Right.
So for anybody who may not like one and love the other, with us, you got to deal with both. Period.
Yeah.
You got to love
That's
them both.
another subject
because
for
we
another
love them
day.
both. But that's another subject for another day.
Yeah.
But I say that because we understand wisdom comes from both of them.
Right.
And their perspective is something that we can glean from,
Right.
regardless if one knows his tribe and one doesn't.
Right.
If one is African American and one is African.
Right.
We glean from both of them.
Right.
We eat richly from both of their tables.
Right.
Why? Because we chose to.
Right. That's right.
And so we didn't look in a discriminatory manner of, oh, well, this brother's African and he can't tell me nothing. Or this brother's African American and he can't show me nothing. He can't tell me nothing. No. We looked at wisdom and we said, God, whose table do you want us to eat from?
Right. Right.
And we humbled ourselves enough to say, if we're going to eat from this man's table or this woman's table, if we're going to eat from this person's table, for us it didn't matter. What mattered to us is that they had the spiritual fortitude
Right.
and the spiritual ingredients to be able to feed us on the level that we were going,
Right.
that we're at,
Right.
and that was important to us.
Right.
Okay?
Go ahead.
Let me finish that.
Sure.
And so I say that because oftentimes here in America, what I've experienced is when our African brothers come over here to America, particularly in the faith-based community, in the Christian community, they tend to set up little pods, little cliques, little sects of themselves in different churches. And so over here you've got the Nigerian church with Nigerian members and Nigerian pastor. And then over here you've got the Zimbabwean church with the Zimbabwean pastor and so forth. And you got the folks from Ghana and they're over here and they've got their church. And you can drive into storefront malls all throughout Dallas and Texas, and you'll see a Nigerian church right next door to an Ethiopian church, next door to a Catholic church or whatever. And what I'm understanding as a believer is that's not God's intent for us to set up these little groups and little cliques away from one another, because that ain't what heaven's gonna look like. So what's happening is we're not locking arms with one another because we're comfortable in, I'm comfortable in my heritage. I'm comfortable in my ways of doing things. And so in a lot of the Nigerian churches, which we've been in, we go and we see that there's a Nigerian pastor, Nigerian first lady, and all of the members are predominantly Nigerian or African. What do we learn then? What do we learn
From one another?
Right. What
Right.
do we learn if everybody comes from the same background? If everybody has the same story? If everybody eats the same foods? If everybody wears the same kente cloth or whatever? What are we learning? So we have to understand that in this move, it's hard for me to believe that God is saying, yes, come here and let's be segregated. Because we black folks here in America, we know that all too well already.
We've already
done that. We've already done the segregation.
Been there, done that.
So in this dispensation of time, that's not something that we desire, is to, let's group ourselves over here and let's just be black people over here. And let's just group ourselves over here and let the Nigerians be over here and let the Cameroonians be over here and so forth. No. First of all, we are black people. We are people of the earth. We're children of God. So if we can't get together, If we can't get together and break bread and have unity and have trust for one another, then what are we doing? We're putting Jesus on top of stuff that's not going to fly. And that's not enough. What Holy Ghost fire are you calling down if you can't fellowship with someone of a different color or a different race or a different creed or a different tribe? What Jesus are you talking about? What God are you talking about? And so I say that because, again, going back to Africa is not, oh, let's go over there and let's bring our American ways to Africa. Or let's go, or the Africans come over here to America and bring their African ways to America and everybody be segregated and separated and do their own thing. No.
No, we should learn from one another.
We should be learning from one another
Right.
and gleaning from one another
Gleaning.
and experiencing one another
Right.
to where we're seeing heaven on earth. But we
That's right.
can't do that if everyone is on their own agenda. We can't do that if I go to one of these storefront malls and I see churches next door to one another, and the Hispanic church is next door to the Native American church, and the Native American church is next door to the Nigerian church, and don't nobody fellowship with one another. Don't nobody talk to one another. Don't nobody even say hi and speak to one another. What God are we worshiping then? What Jesus are we worshiping? So we're bringing that stubborn, stinking thinking back to here again, and then we want to put a glaze of Christianity on top of it.
We have enough separation in this country.
Right.
Enough separation in this country for us to still do the same thing over and over and over. After a while, it's insanity.
Right.
And you said something that it was true. Before I speak on that, I remember when Bishop went to, when he did the DNA test to go and find out. Do you think that did not benefit his family? For him to find out where he was, what tribe or who he was? It benefited him to find that out. Right?
Very much so.
And I believe he even thrived even more because, again, he's doing all these things, great things all over the country and all the world to help what? Help us. Help people. So I think it benefited him to do that. But to go back to the separation, I just wanted to say that, and to go back to the separation. If we're going to be separated here again, over and over and over again, we haven't accomplished nothing.
Anything.
And what are we saying? You said something that was excellent. What God are we serving?
Right.
What revival is God going to do with people who are, I'm over here, I'm Nigerian, we African Americans are over here, we Cameroonians are over here. Okay, we doing that with the white people and the Hispanic people and the Asian people. We got pods all over this country. Okay? What are we doing?
And
what are we accomplishing?
And if you want to know how divided we already are, it's election night.
It's election night.
It's
yeah, we
election
voted,
night, fam.
but
go turn on CNN on one screen, and then go turn on Fox News on another screen, and then turn on MSNBC on another screen.
Right.
We're already divided enough.
Right.
We're already segregated enough. And so as people of color, as black people, if anybody should be able to lock arms and have the common denominator, just even if it's just our skin color, that should bring the unity. That should bring the trust of one another, not this segregation. And so before we go back to Africa, we've got to understand the value of one another. Because as my African brothers that are watching and that will watch, we have a value too to bring back home. Right?
Right.
And what we don't want is what we could get somewhere else, like in Europe or Asia. And when I come home, I want to feel loved.
Right.
I want to feel accepted.
Right.
I already get ugly stares in places in Europe. Not everywhere in Europe. But I already get ugly stares if I go places in Asia, in China.
Forget that. You get ugly stares if you're in some place in Africa. We got ugly stares in Egypt,
Right.
in part of Egypt.
In parts of Egypt, right. But what I'm saying is, when I come home,
Right.
I want to feel love, man.
Right.
Because that's all I'm looking to bring. I don't have no hidden agenda. My wife don't have, we don't have no hidden agendas.
No.
We're not here to take nothing from you like other people groups have in the past. Now, we're not going to point fingers, and we're not going to go there. But what I'm saying is, you've got brothers and sisters here in America that want to come back home and lock arms with you and do business with you and raise families with you and bring and build communities with you. The last thing that we want to feel is this angst. The last thing we want to worry about is corruption. And I'll say this, and I know we've been on for a while, because that's why I know it's going to be a part 2 and maybe even a part 3 on this topic, you guys.
Right.
I can remember several years ago there was a very incredibly talented comedian, and he had a stand-up special. I believe it was on HBO. And in his stand-up special, he had talked about his first trip to Africa. And I can remember then, and I'm not going to be no hypocrite, I can remember then when he was talking about it, and he was talking about all the stereotypical things. You know, he was seeing cheetahs and giraffes, and you know, and when he got off the plane, the smells and you know, and all this different stuff. And I can remember then, and I'm not going to be a hypocrite, I can remember then laughing at the jokes. I laughed at the jokes because I too was ignorant of the beauty and the culture and the environment of Africa, because I had never been. Why do I share that? And I could dig more into that, but I will later. I share that because many of us as African Americans have been given a very poor portrayal of Africa that the media has been feeding us. I know me personally since I was a kid. I can remember, you know, I can remember being a kid, and what you know about Africa was the little kids in Ethiopia or in Somalia that were poor and starving with round bellies, with flies all around their heads.
Right, such negativity.
Such negativity, where white folks were on the ground saying, please donate your money and please help feed the children, and we're going to do great things for the kids. Da, da, da. And it was like the white people were the saviors, and the black savages were broke and poor with round bellies with flies around their heads. That image stuck in my head, and if not only in my head, I know it stuck in many of ours, because we were inundated with those kinds of negative images of Africa.
And to the point where sometimes you would, you know, turn the channel because you didn't want to see it.
Right.
You know?
Right.
We would do that because and we didn't realize, you know, being younger, the reason we were doing it because it hurt.
Right.
It hurt to see it, you know, and it was like we identified, you know, with it, because it was like you're talking about them, you're talking about us.
Right.
You know, and it's true.
Absolutely true. You know what I'm going to do, honey? I want to go out on a limb, because we've got a lot to unpack in this.
Yeah,
and there's a reason why, like you said earlier, why this broadcast was delayed a whole hour. Because of quote unquote technical difficulties. Why?
And
because
you know we believe in doing things in excellence.
Oh, it's total excellence.
So,
we do things in excellence. We do things on time.
Right.
And so again, we had prepared for this at least 2 hours.
Yes.
The minimum was 2 hours before the broadcast.
Yes.
And so for us to get on late tonight, we had advertised, we had marketed, we put things out there for people to join us. And for whatever reason, well, we know the reason now, that this broadcast was delayed. So what I want to do is, I know that we usually go on Tuesday nights.
Right.
At 8 o'clock.
Right.
But I want to continue this conversation this week.
Okay.
Okay. I know some people had election night, and people are probably glued to the television to find out who's going to win in the primaries and all this different stuff, blah, blah, blah. And I understand that. And if you went out there today and you voted, thank you for voting.
Yes, thank you for voting.
I want to applaud you for voting because,
Yes.
again, like I said,
We believe in it.
we believe in it, and
Yes.
people died.
Yes.
African Americans
Yes.
in this country,
That's right.
not 100 years ago, but just around the corner, just a couple of years ago, a couple of decades ago, people died. They took beatings.
Sit-ins, yeah.
Their houses were bombed so that you today in 2022 could use your right to vote, as
Yes,
particularly as
exercise
African Americans.
it. Yes.
So to those who did exercise their right to vote, I applaud you and I appreciate you. And we can sit here and say, oh, well, voting don't change nothing, da 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 da. Well, not voting surely doesn't change anything. And then when you complain for the things that ain't changing, just remember that you didn't vote. So you really are a part of the problem.
Right. And
Because you didn't flex your right to vote to help change anything. So if
Right.
things aren't changing, who's to blame?
and I'm gonna say it like First Lady Jake say, when you need to not say anything.
Yeah. Just be silent. So to those who did vote and use their right to vote, thank you. We
Thank
applaud you.
Yes.
But I think what we'll do is we'll come on again this week before Tuesday because we got a lot to unpack. And I didn't know we'd have so much to unpack until we started getting into the conversation. Because I wanted to get into the travel. I wanted to get into, our experiences in Africa and everything.
Yes.
I wanted to get into that, but for whatever reason, something that took us a different direction, and we're going to still unpack these layers. Why? Because in order for us to really and truly start living more, we have to value life. And we have to value one another. Why?
Right.
Because we're doing life together.
And we have to know where we come from.
Yes. To know
That's living more as well.
to know where you're going.
Yes, absolutely.
And people can say, oh, I know where I'm going. I don't have to look at the past. Oh, you do. And if you aren't, there's going to be a point in your life where you're going to have to. And
Yeah.
I'll leave
Right.
with this.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm speaking from my own personal experience. When I first stepped foot on the continent in 2018, it was in Kenya. It was in Nairobi. And I remember even telling myself, I said, when I get to that continent, I'm going to kiss the ground. And because I wanted to tell Africa, I made it. Not just
Wow,
thank
that's
you.
deep.
Not just thank you, but I made it.
And I
I came back to say,
Wow.
I made it. Because
Wow.
so many didn't,
Right.
either by choice or were killed
Right.
or untimely deaths or whatever. Some jumped off the slave ship because they didn't
Yes.
want to come to the new world
Yeah.
and be enslaved.
Yes.
But when I got there in 2018, and we were there for business, I wanted to tell the continent, I wanted to tell Mama Africa, I made it back. I made it. And with that, I made her a promise silently, is that I will do for you what I can with what you put in me.
That's good.
But you have to tell me what you put in me.
My
You have
goodness, that's
to,
good.
you, Africa, have to reveal to me what you put in me. And I'm willing to seek you out. I'm willing to do the search
Right.
with the help of God himself. I'm willing to do the search so I can find out all that Mama Africa put in me, my grandparents, my great-grandparents, my ancestors before me. That's my promise to her. So whatever your reason is for going back to Africa, I would want you to understand that it's more than going over there for a vacation or a holiday. It's more for going over there to do a business deal.
It's more than that.
It's more than going over there for a preaching assignment to go preach somewhere. Those are all great reasons and great things and great reasons why, legitimate reasons why to go.
Right.
But if you're an African American, you should want to get a part of your history so that you know what your future can and will look like.
Yes.
And when you do that, I believe that God will open up doors because you took the time to not only value what's back in Africa where you're from, but you cherish the people, you cherish the land,
Yes.
you cherish the resources and the opportunities that are there. So, babe, we're going to unpack this some more later on this week. It may be a Friday night or a Saturday night, but there's
Sounds
so
good.
much more we got to talk about.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
I agree. I totally agree.
What do you
Let's
think
it.
about tonight's session?
It's something that we needed to discuss, and I think I pray that it enlightens people.
Yes.
I pray that it gets people to a place of wanting to know more,
Yes.
to understand. I pray it gets to I pray that we begin to open our eyes to see the things that we have allowed to keep us from locking arms and growing together and learning of one another. I pray that it begins to break forth in a way that will yield much fruit. That's the word I want to say, is yield much fruit for us, for our children, for our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, and so forth and so on. And I agree with you. It's so much to unpack. It's so much to talk about. But we're here, like we said earlier, is to live more in every area.
Yes.
We can't live more in one area and the other area is left unattended.
Right.
We want to be well-rounded people so that we can do the things that we are here to do, so that we can live the life that we're supposed to live,
Right on.
and that we can be empowered and we can get past all of these things that are holding us back. That's what I hope this broadcast does.
They've been stunting our growth
Right,
with one another,
right.
even us individually.
Individually.
These
absolutely.
obstacles and barriers
Right,
are like thorns
absolutely.
that are choking the roses from getting up out of the
Absolutely,
ground.
absolutely.
And so, you guys, we thank you so much for tuning in
Thank you so
tonight.
much.
We're sorry that we came on late, but we'll be back on this week before next Tuesday. Our usual time is Tuesday nights at 8 o'clock p.m. But we're going to come back on this week, and we're going to unpack this thing even more.
Yes.
And so we invite you to tune in, share, like on all the social media platforms. If you found this conversation interesting, if you found this conversation was dope, please be sure to share on your Facebook page, on your wall. Subscribe to our page on
Yes.
On our channel, on YouTube, youtube.com/Living More Morgans. And until then, we're going to announce the next day and time this week on our social media platforms. So definitely tune in. We're on Instagram, instagram.com/Living More Morgans. We're on Twitter, Live More Morgans. We're on Facebook, of course, and we're on YouTube as well.
Yes.
And so until then, you guys have a great night
Have a wonderful night.
and keep living more.
Keep living.